Nkensani Nkosi, founder and entrepreneur, founder of Stone Cherrie, of course, and entrepreneur. Thank you so very much for joining us here on the CheckPoint podcast. We really do appreciate it.
It's such a pleasure. So nice to see you in person.
Ditto. We've just celebrated Freedom Day, 32 years of democracy in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I think many people it's just a holiday. And also because of the weight of problems that we have in this country, I don't think people stop to acknowledge where we have come from and where we are now.
Yeah.
And I think out of that post-apartheid period, there was so much opportunity in opening the doors of democratic South Africa to the world. And that's about when you started Stone Cherrie in 1999. Am I correct?
Yes.
What is it about that era that inspired this brand?
There was so much to celebrate back then. I mean, if I take it a little bit of a step back, I grew up in apartheid South Africa. I always say to my kids, well, I'm not part of that generation that thinks apartheid was urban legend that, you hear about. We experienced it. There were armored vehicles in the townships. People were getting necklaced right in front of you. We experienced a lot of violence, anxiety. The country was on fire. And we had to navigate, that space of going to school in town and having to be smuggled back home, get out of your uniform because comrades in the community are saying education later, liberation now. So that was the context. And so I had a very deep passion for issues around identity, for socio-political issues, socio-economic issues. I was interested in the world around me. And I was also interested in what it meant to be Black in the world, what it meant to be Black in South Africa. But then, fast forward 1994, first democratic elections, there's this great sense of optimism.
And freedom to actually explore what you've just been speaking about.
All of those
being
things.
Black, what it means.
What does it mean? And
Black.
for the first time, you can actually move from, active resistance to exploration
and
expression. And that really was the birth of Stone Cherrie. And you asked, what was it about that period that inspired brands like Stone Cherrie, even music groups like Bongo Muffin? It was people, our age group speaks very nostalgically about that period.
Yeah.
Something in the air.
Yeah.
And it was palpable. And that thing was called hope. And hope is really an optimistic state of mind, which kind of is based on an expectation of a positive outcome.
Wow.
And that's what we had then. We had this expectation of a possible outcome, infinite possibility. So that's what gave birth to it then. And, we spoke a little bit earlier on. There was just a sense of can do, everything's possible, I'm going to go for it. And the environment created that sense of possibility. And our leaders as well at the time.
Yeah. Leadership
important.
is a huge thing.
It's everything.
Right? People take it for granted.
It's everything.
But you are led somewhere by someone.
Absolutely. You have to have a goal. We've got to paint a picture. And leaders paint pictures in our heads about a place we are going to. And this is the roadmap. And when you have no leadership, it shows.
Sure.
And I think that's what we kind of experiencing a little bit of
right now. You studied industrial psychology, right?
Yeah.
You were on television, Face of Africa.
Yeah.
You were an actress, but you landed on fashion.
Yeah.
Why did you choose that as your creative activism? You used to call yourself a creative activist, right?
Yeah.
Why did you choose that?
Well, I think the influence, I'm a creative. So So fashion is part of that. It's part of my creative universe. But I'd also been, as you said, I'd been spokesperson of Face of Africa, had traveled the continent, had been so inspired by what I saw on the continent, but also recognizing that we were celebrating international brands. Our models were wearing on the catwalk, they were all wearing international brands. And I thought, looking back at South Africa, there's this urban energy, there's this thing that we described, this atmosphere that needed to be represented as part of our identity. And we needed to kind of, set ourselves free from the shackles of curio, animal print identity. There was so much more that we could offer. And so it just so happened that I was, Face of Africa was about models on a catwalk, and I started getting inspired to create something in the fashion space.
So apartheid, the irony of it all is that the textile and fashion industry was almost protected because of the isolation of apartheid. But once democracy happened in South Africa, the doors of South Africa were opened. South Africa was exposed to imports, to competition internationally.
That's a very interesting point. I've never heard it put like that, but that's true. Exactly what happened.
And you went through that journey, isn't it?
Yeah.
That you could start Stone Cherrie, but you did experience some of these external sort of problems.
Absolutely.
That affected the industry on the whole. Just tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, you're absolutely right that exposure kind of ultimately had a negative impact on the textile industry. And I think, the textile industry, which is one of the biggest industries in the world, one of the most significant drivers of global economy. You would never, you would never think it. You think fashion, you think fringe, you think creative industries, not much of an impact. But at the same time, if you think about it, we need clothes every day.
Yeah.
So yes, it's one of the biggest industries. And globally, there have been significant shifts. China has been everybody's problem.
Yeah.
And just going back to what we were saying about leadership and having a vision and a goal. When China decided they wanted to eradicate poverty, when China decided that they wanted to be a high-end tech-driven economy, they then went and invested heavily in infrastructure, in education, in human capital, in R&D that drives innovation. So they've become very difficult to compete with. Look at the automotive industry. Very difficult to compete with.
Yeah.
So when you talk about, at the time when we entered the fashion space, I had a store, and I was dealing with customers. Consumers would come in and go, goodness, this is something new, we love it, blah, blah, blah. They'd buy. But then to grow, we ended up getting into national distribution through Woolworths and Foschini, which was a breakthrough. They had never done it with local designers. But because they were also starting to see that people are responding very well to local, authentic, well-considered, product. But the minute we got into national distribution, we started to feel the impact, because for the first time, it was like being at university. The first time you started really understanding what the industry's like.
Yeah.
When you're in your design studio and you're dealing, you don't understand that impact as clearly. But the minute you get into national distribution, you're working with a retailer, you start to understand, because pricing is, you've got to be competitive. It becomes very important.
Yeah.
And if you can't keep up, you're just no longer going to be in that environment. You're not viable. So that's when I started to understand. And, there was a time when we went through boom. So we've been through peaks and troughs in this industry, in the textile industry, when there were boom times. But then there came a time when I think the rest of the world was starting to feel this competition, this China having an impact on how feasible your product is. South Africa started to feel that too.
Could it have been slowed down? I know it couldn't have been prevented.
Yeah.
But do you think we could have managed
Mm.
the calamity
I
that
think
we
that,
saw?
yeah.
That it was basically the industry was decimated.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because I don't think we could have avoided it because it impacted the entire world. But perhaps, I mean, I've heard people talking about the liberalization of trade post apartheid happening too quickly. They've spoken about, things like not having a handle on illegal imports
Yeah.
at the right time. So I think there could have been stricter measures maybe that were introduced before the time because cheap imports, the influx of cheap imports from China, those things have impacted us.
Yeah. And they continue
tremendously.
to. Yes.
Not only just in terms of the economy and the decline of the textile industry, but also waste.
Fashion waste.
Fashion waste is a massive thing.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes we may be reactive rather than proactive. So I think we could have lessened the blow. I mean, I know that now government has got the 2030 master plan that they've signed with retailers and manufacturers to try and, because they understand that this industry and the sector needs rescuing.
Yeah, it needs help, yeah.
But having said that, we've had plans before.
It's about the
implementation. It's about implementation. And once again, I'll go back to China. China knows how to implement. They'll say, 5 years, we're going to do this. And the next 5 years, we'll do this. And the next 5 years, we'll do this. And they do it and do it. And it's about consistency.
Yeah.
It's about having a vision that you are so strict about, you never deviate from it. And it's about having all stakeholders marching to the same beat.
On board.
On board.
Yeah. And so just take us through that journey. And then there's that shake-up, really, the reality check of, this is what it means to be in the fashion industry. And then where do you move Stone Cherrie, which is a brand, obviously, we'll talk about the eyewear and the homeware just now, but the clothing, the fashion. Where do you move that?
That Stone Cherrie as a brand developed over many years. We started in 1999 as an idea, but launched 2000. And got into retail. We had a store at the Zone. I think I was saying to you earlier that I miss that side of myself when I was young and carefree and
brave
free.
Naivety.
That was just like, let's open a shop. We don't know what we're doing. We'll figure it out. But learned so much, a tremendous amount. Participated in many fashion weeks that, got us out there. And like I said, it was the environment was so enabling. People were hungry for authenticity and for anything that really was a reclamation of culture.
Yes.
And, that whole period was there was a Rainbow Nation ideal, which was a strong cultural push for unity, for reconciliation. And
as yourself.
Yes.
And you were there, you appeared, represented yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Your authentic self.
Yes. And so we achieved a lot of success, did a lot of shows locally, internationally. Like I said, got into national distribution. I was part of a mentorship program called Endeavor, which was fantastic. I almost see those years as being in university, really. I just learned an incredible amount of things about business and entrepreneurship and the industry I was in, because I actually didn't know anything about it. And then we launched our eyewear brand, which also that happened through a distribution deal. So, one had the opportunity to learn about how that works.
And I
And we
understand
had
it
built,
did quite well on the continent,
yes,
actually. Just tell
yes.
me a little bit about how
Yeah,
you
we
entered
went,
that market.
well, we were fortunate enough to work with Dema Optical. They are a distributor and a manufacturer. So it
Okay.
was a different business model to what we were used to
Mm-hmm.
because they were now licensing our brand. But what it reflected back to us was you have built a brand for someone to be able to come and say,
Yeah,
we
worthy
want,
of being licensed.
yes,
Yeah.
we want to collaborate
Yeah.
with you, design the product with us, we'll manufacture it. And we've got distribution on the continent.
And in Canada.
Yes,
Yeah.
They had at the time Mauritius as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a fantastic team that really took our brand, beyond our borders with absolute passion and vigor. Um, and so that has continued. I think I'd had a very high impact career, very busy all the time, and being an entrepreneur is tough.
Yeah.
And without being able to step back and kind of assess what's going on, the economy has changed. This has changed. You don't know what's happening. You just know you feel like you are drowning. And so I needed to take a step back. I also needed to, I realized, I'm also a mom, so I have kids who need me. And so an opportunity came for me to sell the studio that we had built. And when I got the offer, I was like, wow, sold. This gives me a chance to take a bit of a sabbatical from the fashion side of things, continue with the eyewear,
Okay.
and take a bit of time to try and understand where I'm going. Because I think with the fashion I had seen that the future's not looking the way that I always thought it would. Because we were starting to feel the impact of all of these things that we spoke about, the cheap imports, the fast fashion, all the retailers were also suffering because when Zara came in and H&M came in, they were starting to shake in their boots a little bit. But then it went beyond that. Now Zara and H&M are not the problem. There's Shein, there's Temu, there's e-commerce.
Exactly.
International
not shops.
fast.
Yeah. Nobody's shopping at the shops.
No, those have become the problem. And so I needed to take a little bit of a sabbatical to try and see, whilst obviously continuing with the eyewear, and that's what I did. But we, in that period, worked on a number of things, relationships, which have culminated in the launch of our homeware brand, which I'm really excited about. I've always loved homeware. I've always wanted to get into it. And now we're in a collaboration with a fantastic manufacturer in Cape Town. We have our showroom in Cape Town, and we are online. Yeah, we've got an online store
where everybody is. And
Absolutely.
do you still carry the identity, culture, and self-expression in the homeware as well?
Absolutely. It's still under the Stone Cherrie brand, which will always be about that. Always be about identity. Always be about expressing who we are in the 21st century. Yeah. We shouldn't be, churning out all these individuals who are just trained to go on the ramp. The ramp doesn't make you money. It's only a part of the whole chain. It's the marketing component. But you've got to have distribution. You've got to know how you're selling your product. So I found that in the past there was too much of an emphasis on making people ramp ready, and creating, avant-garde looks that are for the ramp. But they don't sell.
Yeah.
You've got to have a commercial mindset.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're really just entertainment.
Yeah.
And so I would never, ever encourage any parent to take their child to design school to go become entertainment. It takes you nowhere. It's a waste of money.
Sure.
So,
But that's the creative sector on the whole, because we are quite a creative country.
yeah,
But to monetize creativity is a
yes,
totally different ball game, isn't it?
absolutely, absolutely. And that's why, and I'll go back to China and I'll say, when they decided this is our goal, we want to eradicate poverty and we want to be, high-end, tech-driven economy. But what they did is they looked at what are the things that are going to drive that. They invested heavily in infrastructure, education. So the point I'm making is, yes, we've got this 2030 master plan, but is there going to be a heavy injection of capital into education and the right education,
The
not
right
just
education.
the right education?
Relevant,
What
yeah.
is the education?
Mm.
What is it?
Mm.
There's no use, churning out all of these creatives who just know how to do these amazing things and just live. No. Is it relevant? And is it going to make money? So it's very important to think of all of those things when developing an industry. And in our effort to save our textile industry, I mean, I don't know much about this master plan, but I'm hoping that there's a big emphasis on implementation because we're very good. We're very good at being intellectual. Can be intellectual about things and create plans. We've got to implement them and we've got to invest.
Yes.
We've got to invest. Human
South
capital.
Korea is a great example of that, isn't
Yes.
it?
Yes.
I mean, this K everything, K-pop, K-food,
Yes.
K-music,
Yes.
K-movies.
And that didn't just
that's a
happen by
plan.
mistake. That's a plan. That's a plan.
Yeah. Well thought through, collaborative,
Yes.
right? Because government can't do it on its own.
Yes.
Industry players need to come on board. And everybody's got to play their role effectively.
Got to have a unified effort towards a single plan, single goal.
Another threat, may I call it that, to the local fashion and textile industry is this boom in secondhand clothing. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a problem. I do. I think it's a problem. I mean, is it not a problem?
They're flooding the market.
They're flooding the market. And why are we the dumping ground? Because it's guised as, making fashion accessible. Sometimes it's donations, but it isn't. The West, the global North, have got a problem of overproduction, and fast fashion has caused that problem. And so when there's obsolescence and things are no longer trendy because fast fashion is about the latest trend, then they've got to do something about it. And then some clever person said, take it to Africa. And then Africa said, sure, which for me is even crazier. No, we can't be a dumping ground because it causes such chaos. Textile waste, fashion waste is a real problem. It causes environmental issues. And we just don't have the infrastructure to take on junk. And that's what it is.
What are your thoughts on somebody who would say, we now have a choice between cheap imports, secondhand clothing, or expensive local brands?
I understand that. I understand that. I totally understand that. But I think then it becomes government's role to find solutions to that, because President Kagame, you kind of made me look at his thinking And he thinks it's an affront on African dignity to come and dump your stuff. And his whole thing is, rather, let's find a way to create those products. Instead of wearing some Frenchman's socks and underpants or vests, let's create our own. So what I'm saying is, we've got to find, government has to look at that, because you can't say that you're solving that problem, but you're creating a whole other problem, which is very complex. It's a very complex problem. It creates real problems. I mean, look at I think parts of Kenya, Tanzania, the textile waste is a serious problem, seeping into the water. It's causing ecological problems. Yeah, so you can't solve one problem by creating another.
It's actually quite interesting when the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, it tells the story of how he spoke about this with other East African leaders about banning these secondhand clothing, this secondhand clothing flooding their markets. And they were all in agreement that it was a bad thing.
They didn't do it.
When it came to actually doing it, he was the last man standing.
Yes.
Because
of the tariffs
of
and the
AGOA.
Yes.
Yeah. It's either you allow our secondhand clothing to come into your country, or we take you off AGOA. And those are difficult decisions for leaders to make.
Yeah. They are difficult decisions for leaders to make. But the leaders that stand out are the ones that make those difficult decisions, because they've got an end goal in mind.
They have to have a plan.
Got to have a plan.
If I'm going to ban secondhand clothing,
yes,
then what am I going to do
yes,
to compensate for that?
yes,
And if you don't have a plan, I think you're probably more likely to relent.
yes, you're absolutely right.
How is the homeware doing? Can people afford it? Speaking about expensive fashion.
Yes.
Yeah. How is that?
It's. I mean,
sector?
it's new. So we launched probably a month ago, and we've had phenomenal, uptake and feedback from people. Is it affordable? That's an interesting question. I mean, it's not the most high end in terms of price.
Okay.
So yes, we do have a lot that is affordable in the range. And I think even with Stone Cherrie, we've always tried to tier our product offering. So we'll have our window dressers, which is at the top of the triangle, more bespoke, probably more handcrafted, which is expensive to do and do well. And then obviously you'll have in the middle and then at the bottom, which is the more accessible product. So our cushions are accessible. I would say they're accessible. They're not Mr. Price, because it's not Mr. Price. It's not a Mr. Price offering.
Yeah.
And yes, it's a bit of a tough one, because locally produced goods are not cheap.
They're not. And we cannot compete at the bottom.
No.
Also because we do have human rights in this country. We do have labor rights in this country. And that adds,
a layer of...
Exactly.
Of complexity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, you're right. So it is difficult, because on the one hand, you have people who are saying, I think there are people who are willing to pay a little bit more, but they want value. That's the challenge for local designers. People want value. So if they are investing in something, they must get value. They must get something that's going to last them. Because there are those people who say, I can't buy fast fashion because I want my things to last.
Yeah.
So you understand with that stance that you're going to pay a little bit more than the person who's buying fast fashion.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that coin is you as the brand need to offer value, and it has to be something that lasts, that that offers value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it that entrepreneurs make the things that people want to buy, not
Yes.
necessarily that people can afford to buy, right?
Yeah,
People
yeah.
must want to buy it. Everybody wants an
Absolutely.
Apple phone. It's not exactly the cheapest
Yes.
phone in the
No,
market.
absolutely.
Yeah.
There's that.
Mm.
Yeah, there's that.